Remember to silence your cell phones if you have them. For the good of the public, Mr. Taylor is on military duty, and that's why he's not here or calling in this evening. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll move it.
I'll second the political animal.
Thank you for the inside joke reference. I don't think that's going away this meeting. Second by Radig. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the June 13th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources includes A, approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions, and B, authorization to initiate the hiring process. Item 5 from Secondary Roads is to approve the underground utility permit for Westel Systems and to direct the chair to sign the permit. Item 6 from the county auditor includes A, approval of liquor license application for Abu Becker Shrine in Sergeant Bluff, Iowa, and B, approval of cigarette permit for HCI Heritage Express Company, 330th Street. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 7 from Human Resources and Emergency Services is an action item to approval to increase the Emergency Services Department hourly employees' personal day and vacation benefits.
Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director.
Scott Mitchell, Woodbury County Emergency Services Director.
You wanna start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So when we started going through this with emergency services and the holiday pay and all of this, we started to dig through it. The hours that by budget they work a year is 2756. So when you go back and look at their vacation, everybody else works 2080. They actually should get more vacation per year than people who work a 40-hour week because they're on a 24 on, 48 off shift. So that is the changing of the vacation, and then with the personal days, they work at 24 on, 48 off. So if they want to take a personal day, they're taking 8 hours and not a full shift. So that's kind of where that come from and how we come about that. And it took quite a few meetings of Mark, Melissa, and I, and quite a bit of research, and we dug into with what Sioux City Fire and Sioux City EMS have to have a comparison to just kind of see where we would fall.
And the financial impact is a kind of a guess because we don't know how much people accrue. I did add approximately $1,250 for what I know for sure would increase in their vacation. The personal time was a little easier because it's guaranteed hours, so that was around $8,500. So I would say the financial impact did also not include like an IPERS and FICA. So that is straight hourly time that wouldn't be impacted there. Hopefully, by increasing their benefit, it will increase the recruitment for that department and get them some more employees that we need.
Yeah, because we are still short of paramedic, full-time paramedic.
How long has that been open?
Last November,
I'll say no, December,
Yeah.
this is last week, yeah.
Questions?
So mathematically, it's about 25% more time that they work. And then as far as what the increase would be, is everybody comfortable with that?
The table that I provided did show that the ratio or the multiplication would not change as far as hours per, or, worked. What would change would basically be the cap of what they can earn total for the year. So that's how we figured out those dates.
I mean, it's really probably the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, that's what we thought in the meeting. We're just If your cap was this many hours of 2080, then you take it as a percent, and whether it's 2756 now, so then the cap needs to be X, and it's the same ratio, you know, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
like
same ratio everybody else is on, it's just the fact they work.
More hours, so they get more time.
2756 instead of 2080 a year.
Yep.
Yep, that's the difference, you know. I know being there 1 year, they don't get to take a week's vacation, so they better plan that on their week when they're not working 3, they're on a 2 shift, you know, so.
So now the can of worms argument is there any other position in the county where we would have this kind of a issue?
Sheriff's Department, they do have 12-hour personal days. And I do believe the deputy's contract has increased the amount of vacation they can take earlier than previous. And provided also experienced deputies more vacation to start. So we're kind of, you know, working towards that.
So we have 8, 12, and now 24-hour personal days.
Yes. And 9 possibly for civilian jailers.
Okay. Well, if we follow that same, you know, line of reasoning for other positions. Any other, I don't know if comparables is the right word to note from other sectors or,
Well, the vacation time is comparable to the cities, like maybe 1 hour off. So I thought that was a really good way to measure what our vacation time should be. As far as the personal time, the only way to really measure that would be count the holidays, because a lot of, you know, our 2 personal days are kind of built into our holiday pay in that number, you know, being able to take that anytime during the year.
okay.
And I think it's good that we kind of get up to par with Sioux City on the vacation time, which we're about there, because we're not there on the pay. You know, we're a little bit less than they are, you know, which makes it hard for hiring and retention already, so. we
Well,
thought-
it's probably something that should have been looked at years ago, but it's, you know, I understand why Gary didn't, you know, I mean, it's a cost savings, but in the time we're on, in the time we're in, you know, if it helps us recruit more and maintain the people we have, you know, that's the benefit of it.
You know, in the end, it'll be less overtime, basically.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Any additional info? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Second?
Motion by Nelson, second by Radig. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next is item 8, put forward by Dennis Butler, but this is a discussion item with several people in the room. For information, this is regarding Woodbury County Building Services Building. Obviously a broad topic, we might have some questions, so who wants to start?
I would say let them, this came about from a meeting yesterday where they presented their phases. They'll give you diagrams, maps, diagram of the phases, and also a map of the proposed building, then you can go from there.
Okay. There's one major question here is going to be who's in control. So let's try and, if we can come to a group decision on that question, or we can present the options in kind of separated, if there's an LEC authority component and if there's a county component here, because I don't want to get really far into the weeds and not even know which direction we're, you know, the board thinks we should go. Any other initial comments before we invite them up? All right.
Shane Albrecht, Baker Group, 600 Maverick Lane, Madrid, Iowa.
Kevin Ross, Global Group Architects, 14723 State Route D, Savannah, Missouri.
I have a couple handouts I would like to ask if you'd be willing to accept.
Okay.
needs to be received into the record or just for us to look at?
You do either one, whatever you choose.
I
Do you
guess
need
as
them
a
back?
Maintenance
I do not need them back.
facility,
Okay.
it's not necessarily something that, sorry, I turned my mic on. As a maintenance facility, it's not something necessarily that would be
Sensitive.
a public safety issue to give up the plans. So with that said, I'll move to receive.
I'll second the motion by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0.
I forgot, Michelle, we need that one. So where I kind of wanted to start was with this document right here. If everyone would look at that. So as part of what the GJ's contract with the LEC was to do a master plan for the site. For anybody that doesn't know, this site's almost 40 acres. So if you look at this picture, in kind of the very middle of the building, you'll see what is the current LEC that's being built out there and the jail. Phase 2 is the building, which would be a second pod if that ever happened, if you ever needed to expand. Juvenile detention, and the courts for that is in what says the juvenile facility and DHS. And then you'll see out by the road, I guess where if you don't know, on the bottom of the page is the treasurer's office. And then on the far left of the page is the building that you're going to see and we talk about that were proposed. This by no way, shape, or form is what you guys have to do. But what this is what they asked is we got this property, let's make sure we plan for buildings that could need to go there in the future. Again, it's not tomorrow. Was a long-term plan of what the facility could do, knowing that Trosper Hoyt was getting aging and stuff like that. So it was trying to look for how could we place these things on the property. The authority's goal in doing that was to make sure we didn't put something in some place that didn't make sense, that later on it was causing them not to be able to fully utilize the site. Again, you can change it however you want, but this was what we put together after a bunch of meetings and work. So this is kind of how this facility lays out. Kev?
Yeah, and so what we did is we took the topography of the site out there and just figure out where the best use for these buildings were, took some of the county's highest needs for new facilities was, and see how that would fit on that site, circulation-wise, said utility-wise, topography-wise. Obviously, it was a hilly site, still is a hilly site. We've got a big drainage swell that comes down there. It'd be just south of the original building services location, kind of north of the treasurer's office. It would have to be culverted if we did additional site development out there. So some of the things we tried to take into account, how can we master plan this to be the most economical use of this land for the county and looking at long-term goals. So that was kind of part of what we did as our original contract for the law enforcement center, was to go ahead and kind of help that master plan move along and see what our options were. And so these boxes roughly equate to the square footages of either what they have now or what they have now plus what we need. We've met with each one of the departments, with the treasurer, with DHS, with juvenile, courts, as well as county and building services to kind of map these out and start to put some thought to this and see how we can best develop this site, so.
There's a roadway right now that you're seeing that's heading out to the bottom of the property. That road does not have to go there until phase 2 is ever built, or one of the other big buildings comes in.
Right, that's when the city would require by ordinance to have a second entrance and exit out of that site at that point, so.
Okay.
And the original location is deemed to be no longer sufficient, or what is?
It's a little more costly at that point. We originally had in the contract with Housing and Construction an allowance for $250,000 for a small facility. We looked at there, we looked at on the northeast side of the LEC facility. Given the cost and the grading, and we'd have to culvert that area, we're kind of walking away from that. We kind of left that there to show that's where that originally was planned to go, or one of the options that was planned to go. There's still discussion on the mental health facility, the behavioral health facility, potentially going on here or on another site. So we kind of have that earmarked for building services now. But in all the conversations and number of meetings we had with that group, we determined that the mental health facility was not ideal where we're currently showing building services. That area is already kind of flattened out just from the grade works being done with the LEC project. It was a great opportunity to capture that space and do minimal excavation and grading out there, so.
So with the current allotment, it would be too small to help, or would it be somewhere else that requires less grading, or
You're in reference to the
the original location
original location. Yeah, it's gonna be more costly to put it there.
than 250,000?
Yes, yeah. Go ahead, Shane.
So the $250,000 was an allowance, and when we originally put the $250,000 allowance in there, it was literally just for a shed. It was not for a building that tied in. That came after the master planning piece was done. And the original location of where that shed was gonna be is actually where later on got changed and the road got added and stuff.
Right.
So that original location was actually gonna be on the northeast side of the building. So then when we did our master planning, that original location that's shown there is in the master plan, not when the project bid.
I guess I'm asking, could a downsized shed fit in that location right now?
Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, the goal was with the master plan effort was, the shed was just intended to put a lawnmower, maybe a skid steer out there. Looking long-term with the building there right now, the Eagles building there, was to relocate building services in its entirety, along with some additional storage and shop area. And I think it also had, Kenny, if you correct me if I'm wrong, some county storage out there as well too. Pretty hefty chunk of the maintenance area with some county storage as well too.
Yeah, so there's some, Kenny Schmidt's Building Services Director. So there's some things in our building that are unique to a building services group. We have a very large storage area that belongs to file storage for the clerk's office. And we have the group, and I forget, what do they call them, Dennis, that works for don't really work for the sheriff's department, but the Civil Service Commission. They have an office in our building. Those were implemented into this plan that GGA did. So there's some unique things there that are incorporated into that. As Kevin said, originally, we started out with a shed. As the property developed, we talked amongst ourselves, and I don't think I know I didn't, and I don't think others have a good grasp on originally what the size of this facility actually is turning into. And I see building services spending a good majority of their time in this facility.
You know, with the law enforcement
The
center.
LEC.
Yeah.
At the LEC, yeah. It's, I don't know, Shane, what did we say, 1.5 times again the size of the courthouse here? It's large. So I see us spending a lot of time out there. I think a building out there, makes good sense. But I also understand, some might ask why I didn't bring this agenda item. I don't control the purse strings or the county money, and I also don't control or really have anything to do with the legal way that this would get done, if it does get done, whether that be through the county or through the authority. And these guys are getting ready to speak to that here shortly, but that's why you didn't see my name on the agenda item. I'm in favor of it. I just can't control any of it, so, thank you.
So before we move on, I want to head back to the master plan itself. So the LEC approved, the law enforcement authority approved the master plan, correct?
The contract to do it or the actual plan itself that you see in front of you?
Both.
Yes. And so we did, our
when,
firm,
when was that approved, out of curiosity again?
how long ago has that been? Over a year.
Yeah, it was last summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we did that at no cost, no additional cost. We had
Okay,
the,
so Goldberg did the master plan, no cost, because I was gonna ask who paid for the master plan. So
cost.
it was a no cost. Stipulations in the agreement from the master plan say what? Like, any building built here, does it have to be designed by Goldberg then from that point?
no, there's no
moving forward?
strings attached to that. No, it was.
I'm just asking, 'cause
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
no, it was an amendment to the original contract to include the master's assessment of the site out here and study, instead of no additional cost to the county or the authority.
And I do remember there was discussion back when the master plan was being done. I remember Jeremy asking the questions of Rocky at the time.
Right.
But, you know, for the public, for everyone here paying attention, you bring up the master plan, it's important to know these things. I guess a curiosity and, you know, something that we've discussed here is that in the master plan, it's not just county facilities, there was a DHS building in it as well. As a county facility, though, it doesn't necessarily fall under the authority. So that brings challenges to me legally, I guess, you know, how we move forward. So I'm just throwing out what my thoughts have been.
Sure.
And I guess if you want to move back to where you were, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So we had some, so Dennis was in a meeting with us with Jason Kaminsky, the legal counsel, that we talked through this. How the current lease is currently written, and not that it can't be amended or changed, but how the current lease is written, it leads to this building services building being the only thing that could be built under the original lease agreement, possibly with some questions to Maria, that if it's more than 250, what is the max the building can cost and not violate? I think it's chapter 26, Joshua would be better at telling me that, but there's a piece that we can't increase the scope of the project by more than X number of dollars without, and have it be legal. So they were looking into that, so I can't answer that for sure. Does that make?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something you'd have to look into as part of it, as far as exactly what that figure would be.
So Keith, to answer part of what you asked there, Jason said, when you look at the master plan, the rest of the buildings can't be an amendment to the current lease that is with the authority, because the authority was never set up in any of the lease documents to ever have ownership of that building or be part of owning that building, okay?
And then I guess that brings up another question. We own the land, right? The county owns the land?
The authority owns
The
land.
authority owns the land. Okay, so then when the lease is paid off, then the county owns the land.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and there's even a step before, I mean, you're referencing the lease and that part of it, but when the authority itself was set up and the purposes of the authority, when the city and county came together, the actual founding document for the authority itself references a law enforcement center, a single building. Now, in support of that, and I think the $250,000 shed could be part of that, but even more than just amending the lease, I think that if there was gonna be additional authority assets out there that were additional buildings, you'd have to go into whether the city and the county would have to go back and actually amend the authority founding document.
Yes, sir. There was some conversations, and Jason was looking at that whole thing. That gets outside of what he was looking at, is what was the legal aspect of that thing and the founding document, so.
And I think the intent of what we're looking at today is basically, we've got the LEC project underway. We had a piece slotted for building services out there. There sounds like there's some additional funds, potential for additional funds to be allocated towards this project to grow it a little bit, to help eliminate where they're at now and have them out there on site with probably the biggest maintenance project that the county has right now, so.
I've got a question kind of for Kenny. I know we had to, that the LEC approved the purchases of a bunch of equipment for you and your staff to use out there, mowers, that kind of stuff. Could you comment to that as some of the equipment that we bought that are gonna kind of be specifically used out there, not so much in other things, areas that you work? And then kind of tell us about how big of a shed space you would need for that equipment, what kind of stuff's gonna be stored in there, that sort of thing.
Right, yeah, I think if we're just talking about a shed space, and we really originally didn't really talk just a shed, we actually were going to try to incorporate a shop as well, a workshop. We're looking at things like mowers, sweeper and snow blower attachments for bobcats, two bobcats and equipment that we use on both of those. Buckets, sweepers, blowers, things like that. Just, mostly groundskeeping equipment. And then we were talking about a shop where we would store tools and everything that we would need to work in the LEC with.
Would you keep hardware for the LEC components for showers, toilets? Would that be in there? Would that stuff be stored in the jail?
Yes, storage of some kind is required.
Sure.
That really wasn't incorporated into the LEC, and that was another reason. Yeah.
I think that's all I had. Unless somebody else has another question.
So, one of the things that Jason Kaminsky, which was the attorney that Dennis had us talking to, asked for us to decide, because then it helps him with the next pieces for what Josh was talking about is, and what you started with. Who is gonna own the building? Okay? Who's gonna maintain it, and how's it done? Okay? So the overall goal would be have it to look like it belongs out there and is not some other colored building and looks like it fits. But at the end of the day, that's Jason's first question, is tell him what the board wants, what the board would like, and he can help with the advising of what to do next. Unless that's Joshua, and I'm not stepping on your toes, sir. If that's, you want to advise what to do next, I'm grateful for that too.
Well, obviously, it's gonna have to be something that both the authority and the county is comfortable with. I do think that issue needs to be settled as a threshold matter. I don't see any reason why, if it is a county project, why there couldn't be some sort of lease of the actual ground where the building's sitting, that would allow the county to build the building there, or even, if it's viewed as excess ground, that it could be deeded to the county, and then the county could put the building there. But, yeah, I mean, I would want to be part of that conversation on the county side, and then obviously Jason would have to be comfortable with, whatever formalities the authority has to go through to make that happen. So it can be done, it's just a matter of planning out, what it's gonna look like, and then taking the steps that are necessary.
Because he did say we could do, option one was a change order of the contract, whether that's hits that thresholds of what's legal and not, and something you were comfortable with. There was a 28E kind of leasing agreement where the authority would basically give the property to you in that. So I'm not sure, again, that's steps. The reason for this is just purely information, so you guys can think about it, not be rushed into a topic and have conversations, or come up and think about it and have questions.
Out of curiosity, what was the estimated cost on this building?
Which one? The proposed here? We looked at that a couple different ways. We're thinking somewhere upwards of $2 to $2.5 million total project cost. If that thing was completely finished out, we looked at doing just the shop piece of it with the future piece being admin. We looked at a bunch of different things. That's something we hadn't dove too far into at this point, just because this was just part of the master plan, and we just took the schematic plan so we could help master plan that site. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. This is something we've sat down with Kenny on multiple meetings to develop this design, just so we had something realistic to put out there as a placeholder if it was to ever go out there on the authority site.
So out of curiosity, what kind of figure were you using on the price per square foot? And
We looked at that a couple different ways. I think if we looked at the garage area or shop area there, if that was to be something similar to a pre-engineered metal building or something of that nature, with similar materials on the outside to mimic what the LEC is, so it doesn't weigh a sore thumb sitting out here like a metal skin pole barn. We looked about $125 to $130 a square foot for that shop area. And if we did the admin area as just simple metal stud, sheetrock frame, flat roof, again, similar materials on the outside, might be a burnished block or a ground face block, something like that, about $250 a square foot. So when you put those two pieces together, I think the building's roughly 11,800 square foot total. Yeah, 887. So yeah, do some math. It's right around 2.1, 2.2, just rough estimate. Again, that's just kind of where we sit right now with it.
I figured the whole thing at about 250, and I got over 3 million, so that's where I was curious.
Right.
And then
Yeah, sorry.
does that, and you said total project cost, so then are you figuring in like an engineering fee, or are you
Soft
figuring?
costs are included in that, yeah.
Because I'm guessing then if this is done as a change order, then you would expect probably, you know, if they're doing construction administration, if you're doing engineering, you'd probably expect it, you know,
Right.
a %, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, that would include soft cost, would be engineering, third-party testing, owner's representative on the project as well too, so.
So I guess then we're looking at a 2 to 2.5 million project. And you would want it as a change order to the existing project is what I'm hearing?
That's an option, yes.
That's
An
an
option.
option, not,
Okay, because I'm gonna, if that's an option, that's not an option to me. I just don't see how we could do, you know, just a couple weeks ago, we were up here talking about the remaining 100 or 200 grand of the ARPA funds. And Jeremy was wanting to make sure that was bid out and the board approving those bids. That's like less than 10% of what we're talking about here as far as the total project cost, so.
Right.
It would have to definitely be bid out.
I agree. I don't think it's appropriate for a change order of this magnitude. This is more like a reorganization of a whole department. And I know logistically it may make sense, but that's not what the authority sold, or that we all agreed on, really. What is necessary for the upkeep of the facility is kind of what we should focus on, I think. Whether that's the shop and storage, but that's a lot for a, you know, that's a change order that people will say should be bid out.
we have no argument, we were just,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's multiple options. I said that was just an option. I think the other option would be, like you said, to have this thing designed and bid out, or could potentially be a county project, you know, with the deed or the lease back. So there's definitely some things to consider and weigh out. So I know certainly,
Change order is more for unforeseen obstacles, not so much a change in plans, I would think.
so, the last page, just to quickly go over the last page that's there. Keith, I know you're already in the last page, but that just, basically, and there's nothing to say, this is set in stone. We worked with Kenny to try to figure out this, but, so the building's almost 12,000 square feet. So what I want to make sure we understood is right now in Hausman's contract is a $250,000 allowance. What allowance means, for those that don't know, is if we don't spend it, they don't get it. So that money can come back to go to something else, okay? Come back to the authority to be used on something else, and ultimately, if it's not spent, then it would return to the county. Jason had to look based on the articles, and Joshua might know off the top of his head, extra funds, he wasn't sure if they had to go to pay down the debt or if they came back to the county, how that worked out. But the thing is, in my mind, it's simpler than that, because that's part of the $10 million standard allowance that you obligated to the authority, that you don't actually give them the money till it's actually spent. So then it would be in your, still, I'm sorry, Kevin, still in that same $10 million standard allowance. I mean,
that maintenance fund.
what?
Wasn't that 10 million, that was the maintenance fund or whatever?
No, the
or-
10 million was under ARPA, where you guys gave the
Oh,
14.2.
Yep.
There was a $10 million standard deduction that you, the first year's money you gave to the authority to help build the building. We've saved not spending all that money in case there was money coming back, so that it then went by the standard deduction and have the most latitude of what it could be used for.
Right, well, we did what we said we'd do, which was to use it last,
Correct.
to make sure it's all compliant. Speaking of the maintenance fund and a building's needs as this thing comes online, what about the maintenance fund? Using those funds for, a loan on a construction project, a mini construction project that serves what is the purpose of those funds, the maintenance of the facility, and using the allowance as maybe like a down payment. Is there possibility of that?
Do you want to come up for that question? I'm sorry, would you?
Yeah,
Repeat,
the maintenance fund that's funded with the income, funded by the income for the purpose of maintaining the building, could that be used to pay off a loan on a construction project for a maintenance facility?
I do not believe so. I would, as chair of the authority, would not like that to happen. That maintenance fund was put in there so that that building would be properly maintained for decades down the road, and we not have the problem that we have across the street over here now. So I would ask that that never be touched for that. I would ask that it be left there for the reason that it was established.
Okay.
Thank you.
What size storage shed, shop, combo are we needing out there to hold all the equipment?
I think we'd look.
Is it kind of what we have here, just with the office
Yeah,
part
but-
cleaved off?
Right, I think we had like a 30 by 40 or 20, I'm trying to remember what it was.
It wasn't, I don't think it was ever right size, it was just something we
Right.
gave. Basically, I think to answer your question, if you look at what you got here for a drawing, get rid of the file storage in the back of it.
Right.
That would be what Kenny would deem would be for the maintenance. So, I think the question you're asking, Mark, and I apologize if I didn't understand. If I got rid of the office, is it the shop that's sitting there?
Yeah,
It would be the shop that's sitting there minus the file storage that's on the back of it.
so it'd be like a 80 by 50, something like that, whereabouts.
Yeah, so I think that's 84, and that's roughly, yeah, take that 2/3 of that, so
Yeah.
yeah, roughly.
Yeah, okay.
Is the garage and shop aspect not more immediately important than having offices out there?
I think it is, but I don't want to answer that question. I think that's probably a question for Kenny.
I feel this. So right now, just for everybody to remember, I was going down the list and Kevin reminded me I stopped on item 2. Item 3 was, you guys have currently allocated $315. Of that $315, Dennis can speak probably to this better, but $220,000 of that is leftover money in CIP from FY '21, and 95,000 is leftover money from CIP of '22. So you guys did that already in a board motion and offered that money to Kenny for his building. So I was just reminding you of that and put that placeholder there. The last item was money that was originally there for FF&E, but then you guys did ARPA 13 for FF&E for a different 941. So that's what that 941 that says unallocated, because you didn't take the money you allocated, you didn't change that. So that money's just sitting unallocated there. That's where that is. So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I finished explaining all those numbers.
Is the office square footage more expensive to construct than the,
Yes.
In the shop area,
Yes.
yeah.
okay,
Yes.
because,
Yeah, you got finishes there, you got sheet rock walls, carpeting, ceiling tiles, stuff like that. The shop area would be more of a shop area. I mean, it's just garage floors, some paneling on the wall,
And-
light fixtures and a unit heater type thing.
And you could build it as a pre-engineered metal building and have an expandable section so that you could still, if you ever deemed in the future that you wanted to put that storage behind there.
Right.
If you did a pre-engineered metal building, you can drop that rear skin off and extend the building out.
This might be a question more for Kenny, but if we build these plans as presented with the administrative office, everything moving out there, what would become of the building services downtown here? Would you have need for it? What,
That's a good question. There's positive and negatives with that. The positives are, the building and/or the land could be sold. The negatives, with that is, if that area is sold, the parking goes with it. So we need to find places for people to park that come in and do work in some of the other buildings. And we would have to, if we did do that, we'd have to probably do this whole facility so we had the storage, because that's what that storage is. Or find another place for that storage, which would be pretty difficult, I think. But just, there's a couple positives and negatives there, but, yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about it. You could sell that building, and property and, use it against the cost of this, or use it for the cost of this new facility, depending on what you could get out of it, so.
Any questions on the plan or where we got to or from where we started? So just kind of master planning, again, just looked at the opportunity. We had a slot out there for building services for a maintenance facility for the law enforcement center project. We saw a potential opportunity to look at the whole master plan, to further that and potentially move building services out there in its entirety and potentially get rid of the Eagles building down the street there, so.
what was the height of the shop? Do you know that?
I think we didn't need that terribly high. I think we were just looking at 20 feet maybe, 18 or 20 feet. Yeah, there wasn't any huge stuff in there that we needed to store. I think we had some trailers and some service vehicles and stuff like that, so.
when does the allowance need to be obligated?
Prior to the closeout of the contract with Houseman Construction. So right now, Houseman Construction is slated for a substantial completion of September 14th. Then they'll have probably at least a month, if not 2 months, finishing up any loose ends on punch lists. So probably close to the end of the year would be the closeout of Houseman's contract, and that's when we'd have to have that either allocated or returned back to the authority.
And there, you've got one other clock going with you. The FY '21 money has to be, that 220 has to be spent by July 1 of '24.
The CIP?
Yeah. So 220 of the 315 has to be spent by July 1st of '24 in its entirety.
And absent any changes, the authority would just move ahead with the original plan, using the 250 and the 315?
I can't answer that for the authority, but I think that's what's a potential is, yes.
It's
Or
not
not.
that the site is totally unsuitable,
Right.
it's just that this other option is preferred.
Yes.
Okay.
And did they figure it was like a 50 by 53 steel building was gonna be 250,000?
I think we had just, for a placeholder, I think it was like a 30 by 40, yeah,
Really?
maintenance building out there. We just earmarked $250,000. This was prior to bidding the project. We kept that in as an allowance. Obviously, the project come in higher than what we anticipated, so. And it's even increased since we bid this thing, what, 2 years ago?
Correct.
So you got to factor in some inflation in there too, so that building size would probably have to get smaller to stay within that 250,000. Do we have as an allowance there, so.
So we're currently constrained by the actual 250, not the 565, because the documentation says that's the amount you can spend on.
That's what's currently in Hausman's contract, is the $250,000 allowance for the maintenance facility,
Okay.
yeah. And then if the 315 was allocated towards the project, that would have to be a change order to the contract for that.
And as currently understood, the maintenance facility would be an authority structure.
Correct.
But if we'd use county CIP, does that,
That opens up a whole can of worms
that,
right?
I mean, I hate to say it, I think we should build a $250,000 shed. I just think it's cleanest. I think county master planning, you know, how we're gonna do something like this in the future, how we build an emergency services building in the future, how we get the tuck pointing done on this building. I think we almost need a retreat here to plan out some of the future expenditures for the county. But,
The-
sorry, Kenny, no new Nebraska curtains in this place.
I think there's another option. To pull the 250 away from Houseman, don't spend the allowance at all. Let the money possibly come back into your ARPA fund, and then you can do the 565 or something out there. Have a building designed and bid out by local people, because Houseman may not even be good at building a pole barn, and there's people that could probably be more competitive, and you could get a better building for the county. If you were looking at that, then you'd have to look into, then the county would own the building.
I
You'd
say
have to
that
look-
sounds even better, because, like, while we're discussing, I also Googled, like, steel buildings, and, you know, there's online companies saying they can come out and build them pretty cheap, but, you know, I'm sure it's not a concrete floor and all these
Yeah,
other
it's-
things, you know, but I'm just
Little
saying.
deceiving advertisement.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it would be better to bid that out even, because then, you know, we have plans and specs for what we want, and,
And we can make
It's-
sure it's written in there that it matches the building that is there to control it, so it doesn't come out some,
Sore thumb.
what is,
we'll just get them 10 old hickory sheds.
so what does Hausman think about their ability to build,
we didn't talk to them.
you didn't talk to them?
But,
Would they
I would
find
ask-
another, would they recommend someone?
I would ask, the person sitting to your right. I mean, people, there's all kinds of people out here that can build a pole barn, pretty nice, and we can get some decent block. I mean, you got people here locally that can do that type of stuff, that do it all the
Yeah.
time for farmers and different things of that nature. That's not always your best choice to pick a general contractor that's used to doing this. I'm not saying anything against them. That's just not always in their wheelhouse. And I think you can get some better competition with some other people here that could preclude that. Anyway, I'm not, again, no decisions, it's just information.
If it's given back to the county and we build a pared down facility that's 100% county funded that way, what is needed? I mean, I assume there's big equipment that needs to be sheltered somewhere
Right.
on opening winter, you know, so
Right.
are we talking about the pared down facility being something that's not enough for the minimum needs of maintenance? So much so that it's better just to build what you need immediately and then wait for the county to construct a larger facility?
I think if the intent long-term was to move building services out there as part of what we identified in the master plan, we'd be shorting ourselves to build a small thing that we wouldn't be using, or we'd have to try to incorporate that in overall. To get something scaled down to that $250,000 may not fit into the overall facility project that we're looking to do long-term, so.
I mean, to build this as a pre-engineered metal building,
Right.
weren't we at like 870?
Yeah, then with storage and everything included.
Yeah, with storage included, this was like 870,
Yeah, if we
right?
broke that apart, yeah. So,
Again, you could get rid of the storage off the back too, but I'm just saying, right now, if you built just the left side of that, that was about 870.
And I guess, you know, one thing we didn't talk about, I guess, is, or didn't answer maybe to your question is, would a scaled down facility fit the needs or the requirements of the equipment that we're going to have? So we'll additionally be bringing on more equipment. We currently store what we have, most of what we have out at Prairie Hills. And so there, I don't believe there would be adequate space to cover everything out there. You know, so basically we would be, it'd be probably sitting outside either at the new facility or at Prairie Hills, some of it.
I have to have Mark bid out some storage containers or something.
Well, I guess I'm more interested in appropriately sizing something to serve the facility than making a decision today about moving an apartment out to the LEC site.
yeah, and again, I think this was just to put it in front of you guys
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think about and discuss. I'm sure you'll have more questions, you know, once you have a chance to think about it a little bit more. But we just wanted to put this in front of you guys to take a look at and consider.
We could bring back something to you, to be honest, be what kind of still fits in this space, but is what the storage needs that Kenny has and stuff at another time for information and have this conversation again, sir. That's how we're directed.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see an option with the current allowance, an option with what's a bare minimum to serve it on opening day, and then what would be appropriately sized for the county to come back with CIP dollars and bid out. Anything else?
I agree with you, though. There's a gluttony of pole builders in the area. I mean, and steel structures too, but I mean, it would be very competitive to
Yes.
bid it out. Very competitive.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that, come back to you with some additional options and see if we can get this thing right-sized and fit within a budget.
Yeah, I don't particularly want this to inflate the cost of the jail project itself.
Right.
Because we have already planned and budgeted dollars for what we believed at the time was necessary. So if there's an upgrade, so to speak, you know, the county can have that discussion separately. In coordination, of course, but, yeah, you know, tacking on another, a whole office out there is not something I wanna, you know, defend. At this point in the project especially, I mean, if we were under budget, that'd be another thing.
Understood.
So the 220 in CIP, does that just roll back and pay down that 2022 CIP was it from?
Yeah, it's 21 and 22, and it does total 315. And the board did
So the-
obligate it toward,
So the 220 is from the 21 CIP. And then, because if that's not used by July 1st, 2024, then does that just go back
Right.
to pay off part of that 21 CIP then?
it'd be reallocated to our project.
Okay.
But the intent to do this project would be done before July 1st of '24.
And the other thing of why it should be a county, potentially a county facility is, I don't think it's, you know, wise or helpful for this discussion to be had with city council, you know, asking them what they think Kenny should do for his department. His whole department really is what would be up for discussion. at a joint facility, so.
So, and I guess if we pull this out, you know, get the 250 back when the contract's done, we still have that 315 out there. But as a county, we can borrow up to 1.5 million now, correct?
1.2, July 1st, 24 goes to 1.540.
Okay, so it'd be 1.2.
You're still under the
to
1.2
use still-
until July 1st, 24.
Okay, so to use that. This 315 all counts towards that 1.2, right? So
Yes.
as a whole, we could only borrow an additional some 800,000. Just to get that all out there on the table for everybody. I mean, my mind's made up. I think we don't build anything. And if anything, for emergency storage containers, you know, shipping containers or whatever, you can buy a few of those from Mark's and throw some equipment in that as long as it fits in there anyway. I don't know how big your equipment is, but I'd rather, you know, I think we do it the right way. It's the county's building. We bid it out. And I guess with that, if you guys are good, I think we.
So right now, just to be, we never planned on actually having Houseman build a building for 250, just with all the cost overruns and everything else and thing. So the building's not designed for 250, so by the time we got those documents put together, it wouldn't be ready when the building opened anyways. I'll just, for pure transparency, as we've seen costs of everything going up and everything else, we didn't want one more thing that could possibly delay the opening of this building. So we made a conscious decision not to design a building to go with 250, to wait to figure out what we were doing, bring it before you guys.
Okay.
So I just want to be 100% transparent.
So you're saying it wouldn't
with
be ready regardless?
Given the current lead times on equipment, whether it's transformers, generators, switchgear, rooftop units, stuff like that, we're seeing anywhere from 30 to 50-week lead times. So you factor that in, a few months for design into that stuff, then a month or two for bidding out, and then a board approval. And then construction time alone is gonna push it past the opening date.
I was just saying, even the $250,000
Yeah.
shed,
It wouldn't be done.
I think that answers that.
So I guess the only caveat to what Mr. Raddick said is there a situation where we're gonna wait for you guys to come back and say, actually, we can use this 250 to do this? Or are we all in agreement that it's not money well spent if that's the cap?
Maybe that's a conversation and an answer to come from the authority, since they allocated that money towards that project, or towards that piece of the project.
I just didn't want any misunderstanding about where the next step is.
Right.
So I think the next step is to come back and show you what Kenny's needs are, if that makes sense. If you could give me that direction is what Kenny's needs are and what the overall thing, what an actual budget for the overall building looks,
Yep.
for you to make that decision.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other questions?
Nope. Thanks for the open and transparent discussion.
Thank you, guys.
Item 9 is reports on committee meetings.
Community Action Agency, you guys kind of get the minutes for those, right? Typically in your debt. So we had our meeting. Simcoe Awards Banquet and Simcoe Exec all met. We had a guest speaker from EDA. Some awards were given. The notorious Golden Carp Award was won by Lance Hedquist. Very deserving recipient of the Golden Carp. Other than that, that was it.
We had just had the SHIP meeting. The biggest thing is just DCAT funding. Right now, at the state level, they're switching around who oversees the DCAT funds, the decategorization funds. Anyhow, there's some there's some programs that are going to lose funding possibly here July 1st because HHS and then the Supreme Court budget for Iowa handles some of these DCAT dollars, and so they haven't worked out who's going to handle the dollars and who's going to award the contracts, and so SHIP is just working on some emergency funding for that, so that's the biggest thing. And then just the WCCIC meeting, just fiber updates going through the city, and they're getting that all over, working on that, and then just a shout out, just the whole department and John Malloy, they're doing a good job of keeping us safe and secure in the cyber world, so good job to those guys. So I don't want that job, but so glad they know what they're doing. So anyhow, just shout out to them. But they just good report from John and all that him and his staff are doing. So
They're nice, but they try to trick us with the phishing emails.
Man,
I didn't bite on the last one.
don't bite on
I
it.
saw it a mile away.
When in doubt, just delete it. Delete it. But yeah, that's all I have.
Western Iowa Tourism met last week. I was not able to go down to Audubon for that, but there is they passed along, Iowa State is having an agro-tourism workshop. They were doing one in eastern Iowa. I think that one's already passed, and then there's one in western Iowa coming up here kind of mid to end of July, and it's actually not far from here, so kind of intriguing. So if there's anybody, any of our thousands of YouTube listeners that are maybe interested in expanding their agritourism, it actually looks really cool. I looked into that workshop. It's kind of neat. So, and it's that's kind of the next big thing. People want to pay money to come gather eggs on the farm. So, I don't know. Maybe Roy and Charlie can capitalize on that eventually.
So that was gonna be my question. What exactly do they define agro-tourism as?
Well, a lot of it is tourism on a farm. Bed and breakfast, there's a lot of people that want to feed the cows, feed the chickens, gather eggs, milk cows. It's all over the country. People just, they want to get back out in rural areas. I know when we went to Seattle on a vacation, my wife and I, several years ago, we were looking at places, and there was a place on the Olympic Peninsula that they had goats and chickens, and it was like $500 a night to stay on this farm and gather eggs and milk goats, and it was like sold out for like months and months on end.
I think
Every
that's a
night.
brilliant idea if you can get in that market, because basically you're getting paid to have employees.
Yes. So anyway, Iowa State is going to be doing that agritourism workshop coming up in July for Western Iowa. So check that out. Conservation Board meeting Thursday night at Little Sioux Park, so it was fun to only have to drive a couple miles from my house to go to that. The swim pond at Little Sioux Park is not open, unfortunately, due to the low water levels in the persistent drought. But they've had still good numbers at the campgrounds, huge numbers at Dorothy Pico. A lot of the camps and summer programs are full or are nearly full, so that's really great. Good update there. And then had Soil and Water Conservation Board meeting yesterday morning. The technician that we help fund that inspects the dams and structures, that kind of stuff, had a health incident, is not going to be able to come back, so they're going to have to hire somebody for that position. They've got someone part-time that's been filling in that they would like to hire, but they think it would probably take some more money to get him. So anyway, but otherwise the people they've got part-time have been getting a lot of good work done, so they're very thankful for that. But otherwise, that's all I have. So, tractor ride, Saturday, Anthem. It's gonna be a good day. So,
All right, item 10, any citizen concerns?
Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street. I just wanted to update you on some of my activities. I have found an attorney that will handle the case that I brought to you before. And I was at Cassuth County this morning, met with their board of directors, and they will have it on their agenda next week to decide whether they contact that attorney. I know that they're also with your group with Tim Whipple, but Carbon Sync gave them a letter of intent, and they intend to give every county in the state that has an ethanol plant in it a letter of intent to build a plant in every one of those counties. So I think that's going to be a real boost for the Iowa economy. I then met with their economic director team, and they partner with Palo Alto County, and so they're going to pass that along to Palo Alto. I'm meeting with Sioux County next week. I'm on their agenda to do the same thing. What I'd like from you is if you have conversations with other counties, I'm not sure, because Woodbury County is so unique in their case, I'm not sure that this would be the right avenue for you. I think Tim Whipple can probably handle what you guys need. But I would appreciate a positive response if people are asking you about what I'm doing with, I don't know, did I mention the Bevan McCormick is a law firm, and it's David L. Charles is the attorney. It took a long time to find an attorney that is actually expert in eminent domain. I was sure that I would know somebody who knew somebody. Well, it turns out I don't know anybody who knows anybody. It took a lot of searching to find somebody. But I'm getting a positive response, and I think that can help in your cases as well. So, I mean, let's continue to fight the cause. Thank you.
Any other citizens out there concerned? And in the room? That narrows it down to one. Item 11, any board? Huh? Concerned, though, enough to speak. Item 11, any board concerns?
I'm glad I survived a meeting sitting next to a political animal.
Yes, yes. Congratulations for being in the Siouxland Life magazine as well, Mr. Nelson.
Well, it wasn't a cover, but page 5 will do.
I was surprised the meeting wasn't more wild, being led by a political animal.
He must have had a big lunch.
Yeah, it's true. That's. Nothing from you, Mr.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm glad we had the sheriff's department here to help control or
Yes,
tame the wild
Yes.
party political
yes, yes.
animals. No, couldn't think of a good one. That's all I got.
Very patient animal. All right.